Well, I think we have our Weed and Seed board assembled again. So let me welcome all of you here, particularly the press. And you're going to see the remainder of our Weed and Seed meeting here this morning. And I'm going to give you just a brief explanation of what Weed and Seed is. Many of you in the press, if you've been around for a while, you know what Weed and Seed is, and you don't need an explanation for this, but I'll give you a brief one. Actually, the Department of Justice violent crime program right now is Project Safe Neighborhoods. That's the official name of the Department of Justice program, Project Safe Neighborhoods. And you may have heard that before, covering law enforcement efforts in the state of Alabama, and it's nationwide. Our local program in Selma is Weed and Seed, and Weed and Seed was a program that was here in Selma several years ago. It was very successful, as I understand it. It was well before my time, but it has what we call brand recognition. People know that it works, and as the word suggests, there's a weeding component to it and a seeding component. The weeding is getting rid of the worst offenders, what we call the trigger pullers, the people who are committing crimes primarily with firearms and illegally doing so and terrorizing the community. That's the weeding part, getting those folks off the street. The seeding part, which is arguably just as important and perhaps more important, the seeding part is doing the kind of programs that are necessary to make sure that the violent criminals do not come back and that you don't raise another crop of gang members and that kind of thing. So this Weed and Seed board is at work doing both the weeding and the seeding and coming up with strategic planning to make Selma safer and a better community. One of our subcommittees that's going to report now is the Prevention, Intervention, and Treatment Subcommittee. And Dr. Avis Williams is going to come and report, and Dr. Mitchell from Wallace College is also, Community College is also on that committee. They're co-chairs, but I'm going to ask Avis Williams to come now. And before Dr. Williams steps up here, let me just tell you a little bit about her. We're very proud of her in Selma, and for good reason. She has been in leadership positions in the U.S. Army, both in Korea and here in the United States. She received her doctorate degree from the University of Alabama. She's taught English and physical education. And I found this interesting in her bio. She coached dance teams and track teams. She's been a personal fitness coach. And I'll say this, just knowing her the short time that I have, Dr. Williams is a visionary when it comes to education and making Selma a better community. And we are lucky to have her on the Weed and Seed board, and we're lucky to have her in Selma. Would you please welcome Dr. Williams.
All right, good afternoon or good morning. Thank you. So I am, again, co-chairing the Prevention, Intervention, and Treatment Subcommittee. And one of the first things that we realized was that this is a large amount of work that's necessary. And in order for us to effectively tackle and grapple with the issues around prevention, intervention, and treatment, we did decide to split into 4 distinct subcommittees. The first one is education and workforce. The second is community supports. And then we have drug abuse and prevention and mental health. So I'm going to just kind of walk you through where we are with our goal setting and some of the needs that we have identified within those areas. One of the first things that we've recognized is the fact that we are in need of having some leadership for the mental health piece. And so our subcommittee is working on ensuring that we've got leadership to look at what our goals and strategies should be around mental health. For education and workforce, we want to establish after-school programs within the city and county schools determine the needs and supports for adult literacy, because we do know that in a high poverty community such as Selma and Dallas County, that adult literacy is certainly a challenge. Educate the community on ready to work and work keys to expand access. Fund school resource officers, cameras, and other safety measures in our high needs middle and high schools. And then also create an education and community foundation, and looking at a cradle to college model. And I did give a few copies of this Woodlawn Foundation brochure. One of the action areas or particular potential strategies that we looked at was to determine some site visits of successful education and or community foundations. And I did have an opportunity to visit the Woodlawn community in Birmingham. Huntsville also has a Schools Foundation that's successful, and then there's an organization called the Schools Connection that lists a variety of education foundations. That would be an area where we can do some further research. Another strategy within that education department will be to create community-wide reading programs. And this is just where we engage the entire community around the idea of improving literacy. We're going to partner with the Selma Police Department as well as the Dallas County Sheriff's Department to ensure that we can provide school resource officers for our high needs middle and high schools. Plan ready to work recruitment sessions to all sections of the community. And that's just so that we can get the word out about this valuable program so that we can not only improve education but improve the workforce within our overall community. And as far as funding needs for this, there are some opportunities for us to seek grants to support adult literacy, to support the funding of school resource officers, and also other factors that may be needed to improve job readiness within our community. We're also asking a few questions as we grapple with this, because we certainly don't have all of the answers. We're pondering the factors that will support all of our schools within Dallas County and Selma City schools coming off the felon schools list. So in other words, improving reading and math outcomes across all grade levels and across all schools within our region. And then we're also looking at how do we attract investors for the much needed holistic approach to the school and community revitalization that's necessary within Selma and Dallas County. The next is the Community Supports Subcommittee. And for their goals, we're looking at establishing a comprehensive list of available community support organizations. One thing that we know for sure is that there are a lot of viable organizations that are working within our community, and we don't want overlap, and we want to ensure that these organizations are working together. Develop enhanced awareness for all available programs and services. When community members are in need, they need to have an easy resource and access to those resources for their particular challenges. Ensure that current and future resources are easily accessible, and determine potential program duplication and advocate for streamlined approaches for greater coordination. And again, just making sure that we're not duplicating processes, duplicating resources, but that the entire community has access. And some of the activities around this particular subcommittee is to identify those existing and established organizations, but then also create an awareness campaign. And this is where we're looking at public relations and making sure that we have outreach within the community. Invite community support organizations to convene and dialogue on a regular basis regarding the specific services that they offer, and then establish community support groups or a buddy system for programs that already exist. As it relates to funding, we want to seek funding to create and improve the mechanisms so that we can educate and coordinate all of these community organizations and partnerships. Around drug abuse and prevention, our goals are to establish alternative programs specifically targeting parents and the young adult community. As we look at the drug abuse issues within our community, we of course need some data points, and so one thing that we're looking at is to partner with organizations that work on drug prevention and drug abuse, and to seek some specific data so that we can know exactly how intense the problem is and where the problems lie. Educate the community on the existing resources within Dallas County. So just like with the community resources, we want to ensure that any families, whether it's with children or adults, that they understand the resources that are available for drug abuse and prevention. And then we also want to fill in the gaps in terms of resources through what we call a center of healing. And there is a similar center, it's called the Zone Center, that's in Marietta, Georgia. So one thing that our committee thought was important was that we identify best practices that already exist and look for opportunities for site visits, look for opportunities to learn from the mistakes that others have made and the growth that other communities have seen. And then we also want to address the can't pass the drug test problem that we know exists in Dallas County as it relates to seeking employment. You know, we want to ensure that when our citizens are looking for work, that they are not disqualified because of a drug-related problem. Another activity with this would be to provide training for peer support and helpers who are in recovery. Because, you know, as we look at the problem with drug abuse, we also have to look at it from the lens of addiction and make sure that those supports are in place. We want to ensure that funding will support this, and particularly the work when we have recovering addicts within our community. So that's kind of a snapshot with the work that this committee did. We had a phenomenal meeting last week, and then the subgroups met, and we also considered who was missing from the table, who else do we need to add to this conversation to ensure that we're not missing any particular aspects of it. Because like I said, this is a really large amount of work, but we've got the right people at the table for those committees that I mentioned. We just need to ensure that we've got some folks who can drive the mental health portion of this. So I'll take questions if anybody has any questions or comments, and any feedback that you all have too in terms of the goals that we're looking at within this committee. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a transition note. We're now going to shift from our Wheat and Seed meeting to a conference on the $1 million emergency grant that we have received for law enforcement purposes, and we're going to give you a description of that. And we have some folks who are going to speak here this morning. There's folks that are assembling behind me. Starting to look like a football team. They are, some of them will speak, and others will just take your questions. And so thank you again, Dr. Avis Williams, for your report on the committee. And if I could, let me just tell you what I think Jimmy Davis, our PIO, has already told you, which is you'll be given before you leave a written press release from us that will have spellings of some names and some detail that you'll hear up here. So if you're worried about the spelling of names, that kind of thing, hopefully it'll be in the press release itself. So let me just say that it's pretty well known that we have a violent crime problem here in Selma. And because of that, we are receiving some emergency funding for law enforcement purposes. This is what we would refer to as weeding money. This is not seeding money, this is weeding money. And again, the strategy that we're going to use is one that has been successful across the whole United States. Violent crime is starting to go down in the United States after having risen for about 6 years. And it's going down because in the last 2 years, we use a very successful model that I have talked about across our district, which stretches, as you know, from Mobile down in the south up here to Selma in the north, which is simply you identify what we call the trigger pullers, the folks who are the violent offenders. Often they are people who are illegally in possession of firearms. and you get the worst of the worst off the street. There's really not that many of them in Selma. There's enough to have caused a violent crime problem in Selma. We're in the process of getting those folks off the street. This grant will help us to do that, and that's what we want to talk about here today. And we have Brian Foster, he's still in the room, and John, yeah, thank you. We have some folks from ADECA from Montgomery who are helping us with this grant and who are experts and specialists on that. But I just want to say, as the U.S. Attorney for this district, this is a game changer for Selma, Alabama. This is a game changer for Selma, Alabama. We will take back our streets. We will make Selma, Alabama safe once again. And now it's my distinct honor, to introduce Judge Maggie Drake Peterson. She is our director of Weed and Seed that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And we call her simply Judge Drake, and that's because for many years she was a circuit court judge in Wayne County in Detroit, Michigan. She's from here. She's from Oroville, grew up in Oroville. She was valedictorian of her high school class. That was Keith High School. And before graduating from law school, Judge Drake has had a lot of careers. She was a nurse in Detroit, and then she got on the police force. She was one of the early women to be a uniformed police officer on the street, and that was again in Detroit, Michigan. And then she went to law school. And she was a lawyer for the police department, defending police officers. And then she ran for the circuit court bench and won, and was a distinguished judge for many years there on the circuit court. Here in Selma, she returned after she retired from the bench back to her home in Oroville. She's been very active in a number of local community activities, including the library board for Selma and Dallas County, and on the West Dallas Water Authority, she serves as the chairperson. Judge Drake is married to the Reverend Dr. Joe Peterson. He's now a retired minister. Judge Drake has become a trusted advisor for me and for the Weed and Seed Board. We're very lucky to have her. Would you welcome her to the podium, please?
Good afternoon. The U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, today awarded $1 million to the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, better known as ADECA, to help law enforcement agencies respond to the increased homicides and gang activities in the city of Selma and the surrounding area. BJA invited ADECA, an established state agency with a recognized ability to oversee emergency law enforcement situations, to apply for funding under the Emergency Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Program, FLE. The FLE program allows BJA to make funds available to a state government to respond effectively to an oncoming situation, one that is or threatens to become a serious or epidemic in scope, and in which state and local resources are inadequate to protect lives and properties of citizens. The funding through this award will provide much needed equipment for law enforcement officers and overtime expenses to perform situation patrols of high crime areas. This program supports the Department of Justice mission of reducing crime and supporting public safety personnel in the context of an emergency situation. A separate Department of Justice initiative known as Project Safe Neighborhood, or PSN, targets and aims to lower violent crimes across America. This effort has been successful, and violent crime rates have fallen in most major cities in the United States over the past 2 years. The model to reduce violent crime is very simple. Identify the trigger pullers who are the worst of the worst and who are inflicting the most damage to our communities, and then prosecute them for the federal crimes that they commit. In the Southern District of Alabama, this means primarily prosecuting convicted felons who illegally possess firearms. The PSN effort in Selma is called Weed and Seed, and is led by U.S. Attorney Richard W. Moore, United States Attorney for the Southern District of Alabama, with a steering committee of local civic leaders, city officials, law enforcement officers, educators, and business leaders. The Weed and Seed concept was previously used successfully to reduce violent crime in Selma and is a recognized brand in the community. Weed and Seed integrates law enforcement, community policing, prevention, intervention, treatment, and neighborhood restoration effort. It is a comprehensive approach intended to empower citizens to take back this city from criminals. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. And I've asked Dr. Williams, Avis Williams, to come back to the podium and just give her thoughts about what this means for Selma.
Thank you. This is a great day for Selma and the Dallas County community. You know, as an educator, one of my top priorities is making sure that my scholars are safe. And that's in school and out of school. And what excites me about this grant is the fact that we are working together as a whole community. We've got officials here from both school districts as well as the city and county law enforcement. And together we can make a difference to ensure that the lives of all of our children are protected. And again, whether they're in school or out of school. I look forward to working closely with our law officials here, particularly around school resource officers, and also looking at what modern school safety needs to be in this day and age. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this committee, and look forward to continuing the work. And again, it's a great day for Selma and Dallas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And now I'm going to ask our president of Wallace Community College, Dr. James Mitchell, to come to the podium, please.
Thank you and good morning. I think you've heard a lot this morning already, but for too long we've talked about the problem. But the great thing about today is we begin and we have started this initiative where we're going to solve the problems. We no longer continue to talk about the problems. It's important because I consider this what we see, we have talked and heard about the weed part of this, and obviously our law enforcement officials with their expertise address those particular challenges and issues. The other important part, as Attorney Moore has said, is that the seed part, because you know, if we address just one segment of it, then you know the other thing drags us down further. We are addressing the seed part because that will help us rebuild the infrastructure in our communities, both economic infrastructure, community development infrastructure, health and mental health infrastructure, education. And that way, when we do that, we are lifting up all sectors of our community and all people. This effort will be successful because I simply say there is no room for failure. Thank you.
Dr. Mitchell, and now I'm going to ask Owen Peak to come. Owen is a business owner here, Peak Insurance, and he represents, I think, the kind of folks that we hope will continue to come back to Selma. We have a lot of folks that we hope in the future, because of what we're doing with Weed and Seed, making Selma safe again, improving our schools, are going to reconsider decisions about Selma and hopefully come back and help us make this city the great city that it can be. Owen.
As U.S. Attorney Richard Moore said, my name is Owen Peak, and I'm a member of the Weed and Seed Board. My wife and I actually moved back 7 years ago to Selma, operated a business, Peak Insurance, with my father. and I believe Selma's best days are still ahead of us. This grant, it's $1 million grant. It's a big grant. We're very excited about it. But what excites me more than the grant itself is the collaboration between our law enforcement agencies to really combat violent crime and crime in general in Selma. I'd say starting about 6 months ago, we've already seen a major reduction in crime here. Every community has its challenges. Everybody knows we have ours here in Selma, but the difference is the leadership here in Selma has really begun to work together to meet those challenges head on. And for that reason, I believe our best days are ahead of us.
Thank you, Owen. I'll just tell you, we couldn't do this grant without having somebody locally to administer it. And our probate judge, Judge Jimmy Nunn, has agreed to do that as part of the Dallas County Commission. And we're extremely grateful that the judge has agreed to do this and step up to do it. And so I'm going to ask the judge if he would come up and say a few words. Judge?
Thank you. I say good morning, everyone. Good morning. Like as previously stated, this is a great day in Selma, Dallas County, Alabama. For us to receive $1 million, that shows a lot of efforts that has been done as it relates to coming from the Department of Justice, ADECA, and then our U.S. Attorney Richard Moore. We should applaud him for a job. When Mr. Moore came on board, he came in with his hot running, ready to go. And Selma and Dallas County was one of the counties in which he wanted to work on, and he wanted to hit it real hard dealing with the crime. So we do appreciate the collaboration and working with us. Sometimes we see our own needs and problems that we have, but we just need a little bit of assistance. And with the collaboration that we have and working with the U.S. Attorney, along with this $1 million, it is really going to help not just the city of Selma, but it's going to help Dallas County. We, as stated, yes, we will be administering the grant, and we want to also thank our employees for agreeing. Our county administrator, Ms. Barbara Harrell, all of them have agreed to administer this grant. We also appreciate John and Brian, who's here with us. We thank y'all for everything that y'all have done. This is really going to be a spinoff to help the community to alleviate this crime via the police department and through the sheriff's department and through the DA's office. It's really going to help on the educational level. It is really going to help with economic development. You know, people will not come in a crime-infested area. So it's going to help with that. It's going to help with buying homes. You know, people will come in and live in your community if they feel that it's a safe community. Even dealing with education, they want a safe and a place where they can educate their children also. So when all of it comes together, it really helps everyone. The saying says that a high tide raises all ships. So we're hoping that everyone will benefit from the opportunity that we have, and we should take this opportunity and look forward for a better future here in Dallas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. And now I'm going to open the floor up for these folks behind me to come, those who want to make a statement. And I will say that all of our WEDC board members will be here after we end this press conference. If you have questions of the WEDC board, they'd be happy to talk to you. But I'm going to open the floor up now for any of you who want to step forward and make a statement.
I'll be very brief. For those that don't know, I'm Spencer Collier. I'm the Chief of Police in Selma. The only thing I want to add is recognizing the synergy in this room. Law enforcement, for the most part, is not rocket science, but there are a few keys to success. A, acknowledging you have a problem, and we have a problem in Selma, but we have the right people in the room to fix it. B, collaboration. And I can tell you, I just reached my 2nd anniversary as chief, and the synergy of local law enforcement working together has never been higher. The sheriff or the chief can speak to that. themselves, but we are working daily. We know it, and as a community, we hope that you're seeing it. If not, you will see it moving forward. $1 million gets the media here, and that's a great thing. And I want to close by saying two things. First, thanks to the leadership of the city of Selma, my boss, the mayor, and the city council president, for giving me the time and the ability to work on this program. And secondly, I want to thank ADECA. I served as a state administrative agent for 6 years for preparedness grants. And between ADECA and the U.S. Attorney's Office, I have never seen a $1 million grant turned around with this type speed. We have a problem, but we have solutions, and we have the right people at the table to fix it, and we are committed to improving the quality of life in Selma. Thank you.
I'm Michael Jackson, and just returning here. I just want to say the last few weeks, we managed to get out a lot of gunslingers off the street, gang kingpins, and drug dealers. Things are moving forward. And with this $1 million, we're going to take it home. We're going to stamp out crime, completely violent crime. As y'all know, citizens have said over and over the last few weeks, as this initiative has started the last few weeks, it feels safe around here, a lot safer. You can go to your car at night. You can walk around at night downtown. Just don't walk around at 2 or 3 in the morning now. But you can walk around late. People are feeling good about the community now. And we expect a lot of businesses and a lot of money to come into sale. When people feel safe, they feel enjoyable, they want to relocate the kids and their family here. And that's what we have here. We're all working together now. The sheriff's office, the police department, the U.S. Attorney's Office, ATF, you see all these different agencies. My office, our task force. We've started task forces around here. But as everybody knows, it takes resources to complete the process. And that's what we want to thank our U.S. Attorney for and ADECA, bringing us those resources. You all, I feel rich. I feel like Harold Spears today, rich.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chief John Hatfield on behalf of Sheriff Mike Bramble. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you for the support that we got with the grant. It is our intention to make this county and this city a safer place. And we can do that by working together. We can do that by increasing our technology. And we certainly anticipate Selma and Dallas County being a much safer place. Thank you.
I'm going to open it up for questions from the media about the grant or what our plan is, and I'll just ask anybody who wants to respond to step up to the microphone. So questions from you.
So the money, the $1 million, will you be able to, I know that we had an issue here recently with the city of Selma and the school board trying to figure out how they could come up with money for school resource officers. Can any of that money be used for that?
I'm hopeful that it can, and of course the experts here from ADECA can probably tell you exactly about that, but that's a critical need. We need to address that, and I'm going to be advocating as much as I can that Avis Williams and the school system get that. Brian, do you want to speak to that? Brian Foster?
We'll have to have all budgets approved by BJA, so once the law enforcement officials here, the city, county, DA get the budgets together, we will send those as a change for budget approval.
One last question for me, and that is, I know that the police jurisdiction goes from the foot of the bridge to Craig Field, or right before it gets to Craig Field. Will any of these monies be able to be used for projects that are fighting crime in the Selma area and other parts of Dallas County?
Well, you know, what we've done with Weed and Seed is we've identified the hot spots mostly by wards in Selma. And that's where we're gonna concentrate first. I mean, I recognize there's a problem out there, but we're gonna do this as a matter of priority. And again, we're looking at where's the worst of the worst, go after them first.
I want to add to the SRO question. I mean, I both the mayor and I think the council president want me to add. We hope to present something to the council tonight, and let me be clear, I'm not a council member, but I want to thank Dr. Avis Williams. She and I work close, and so we're gonna bring forward a proposal. It's not the number, Randy, that we were looking for at one time at 5. But I think the realignment, I'm committed to devoting 2 full-time, and the hope would be we can adjust that MOU to get an additional 2. So it's not 5, but it would be 4, and that's an incredible improvement. Now, the goal would be, once we start getting an opportunity to draw down on the grant, to maybe backfill the hours. But this is so important that it's going to be my recommendation to the council that through realignment that I commit to full-time to the school resource officer program, in hopes the school board will add an additional 2, give us 4 full-time SROs. It's a good question. Thank you for bringing it up.
If someone could speak to maybe the crime problem from a 30,000-foot view, I know you all have kind of lived this on a day-to-day basis, but for maybe communities outside Selma, kind of just explain when this started to escalate, and you kind of talked about some arrests, why those arrests are key in the weeding portion of this.
Well, I can address that generally. So I'm not sure why the crime problem in Selma got as bad as it is now, or when that started. When I became U.S. Attorney, I was confirmed by the Senate back in September 2017. And when I first came to Selma and started talking to our law enforcement officers up here, I was alarmed that there was a level of violence here in Selma, and that it was not being adequately addressed. So there's far too many murders, far too many gun violations, just citizens not feeling safe in their community. So what we have done on the federal side is to indict a number of key players in Selma. A number of them are in the penitentiary now. That's why you hear reports from citizens saying they feel safer. Some of those, what we call the kingpins, and some of these gangs have been taken out of the community. We have 19 defendants under indictment now. They are scheduled to be tried in October. We prefer to try people from Selma here in Selma. But we can't try those 19 here because we don't have the facility at the courthouse to accommodate a trial with that many defendants. So we're going to try them down in Mobile. So I just give that as an example of the work that's being done, and that's all in coordination with the police chief and the sheriff and the district attorney here. We're working together, and we're seeing good results. And let me just say, anytime you use the model that I've talked about here today, anytime you use this model, your streets will get safer. It's been proven time and time again. All you have to do is know who your trigger pullers are, identify the worst of the worst, and get the most violent off of your street. And again, there's not that many of them. It really isn't. So that's what we have been doing. We still have a lot of work to do. But I can assure you, if we continue to work this model, and with the additional resources this grant is going to provide for us, we will be successful. Yes, sir.
So you said that there's not that many trigger pullers in Selma. That kind of sounds like you already have an idea of who they are, where they are. Can you kind of take us into the nuts and bolts of the weeding process, what resources will allow you to do to get people on streets?
So you know, I'm obviously not in a position where I need to be talking about our intelligence information, that kind of thing, but we have a network of law enforcement officers on task forces, and folks have been here in Selma working the streets for a long time, and they know who's in the neighborhood. And yes, I mean, we have pretty good intelligence about that. I can't give you a number and say we have, you know, this number of folks that we've got to go after. But I can just tell you, having been in Selma now for almost 2 years and watching this, there is a way to get Selma back to where the streets are safe. And it's very doable, and it's much more doable having the kind of resources that this grant will provide. Other questions? Justin?
Will the school resource officers that's been committed by the city, will these officers come off the street? Will they leave us an officer short?
Dave, the short answer to that is no. We are allocated 45 officers, and we are about 2 short. So we'll move forward in our hiring process, but I also want to be clear, I'm not going to hire 2 officers and make them SROs. Of course, we'll use experienced officers. Already have one already committed as an SRO, so we're only talking about 1 more. So no, we will not be pulling off the street. But it's important to act now because we're in a time frame where I'm going to have to hire and train and have that officer ready to assume a patrol position so I can move another individual in as an SRO. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you, sir.
About how far or how long is this expected to last, this grant? About how long is the money expected to stretch?
18 months. So like I've discussed with all our law enforcement partners, we got to get after it. Right? There's a window here. It's a narrow window, and it's 18 months. I'm fairly confident we can get this done in 18 months. Maybe not all of it, but the majority of it. Yes, sir.
And they said budgets have to be approved, but is there kind of an outline of X amount of dollars for officers, patrol, X amount for SRO, technology, vehicles, etc.?
We're still working those details out. Yes, ma'am.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard someone say that this has been previously used in Selma. Is that correct?
Just the weed and seed program, not this particular grant, but the weed and seed method of weeding the worst of the worst and seeding in the right kind of programs. I mean, y'all know what the problem is here. The little street gangs that are in Selma, they compete for our kids. And if the gangs can offer them enticements so that they're lured into the drug trade, for example, it's hard for us to compete with that. We have to have some alternative for our young people, and we have to get to them early. We can't wait until they're in high school. We can't wait until they're in junior high school. I mean, we have to start really early. If we don't do that, if we don't do the seeding work, all the law enforcement work that we have done will be in vain. We have got to get the seeding work done. At the same time, we're getting rid of the worst of the worst.
And was this grant something that local leaders sought out? Kind of how was Selma selected for the grant?
So I started campaigning with Washington, telling them the need that we had, and I had the assistance of the ADECA folks to be talking to Washington, and we convinced them that we've got a serious enough problem to warrant this kind of money. So it's like somebody said earlier, you can have everybody really working very hard, but if you're short on money, it's going to be difficult. And again, this will be a game changer for Selma.
What about the seating aspect? I'm sorry. Is there a general outline or some specific plans you have on the seating side in terms of being able to help with economic development and provide jobs or short-term training?
Yeah, so that's what this committee is about. That's what the Weed and Seed Committee is about. They're formulating those strategies now, and you'll hear more about that going forward. So I just tell you the reason why it's important to me to have these folks at the table is because if this is just a law enforcement-led effort, eventually it will fail. We aren't so presumptuous to think that the U.S. Attorney, the police chief, the sheriff, or district attorney can turn Selma around. The citizens of Selma have to have the will to take their city back. Let me say that again. The citizens of Selma have to have the will to take their city back. And from what I'm seeing, the people here have the will to take their city back.
Could you speak to, you mentioned the gang problem that you have here. Is there a comparable city within your district that has comparable problems, or is this sort of the pocket of your district that's the worst that you've got so far? And maybe explain how far you feel like you've gotten as far as taking those trigger pullers off the street.
So I'm not sure I want to get into comparing my cities and my district on that particular scale. But, you know, Selma is no different than a lot of other cities across the country. You know, particularly when you haven't worked this particular model that I've been talking about. If you don't work this model, this is what you will get. You have to be vigilant and you have to stay on it. So in terms of where we are, we have identified some major kingpin leaders in some of these street gangs. They, for the most part, when I say gangs, they're wannabe gangs. They're, you know, they identify with some of the national gangs that you might be familiar with, Bloods and Crips and that kind of thing. And I don't mean to suggest that because they're wannabe, they won't kill you graveyard dead. They'll kill you just as dead as the real gang members. But we have taken significant numbers out of the community who are no longer on the street. And that's why if you ask the people around this table, and I invite you to do that, they will tell you that Selma seems safer today because we have done that. And again, it's working the model. You keep working the model, and if you accelerate it because you have more resources, you'll get progress quicker.
Do we have a time frame or so when you would say people start to feel like Selma is safer?
That really depends on a lot of things, and you know, on the federal side, we move pretty fast. We really do. We get people in and let them have their day in court, let a jury decide. But in terms of putting a time parameter on it, that's hard to do.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that people, you said that now residents, you'll see that there's a difference and they start to feel like Selma is safer. About when do you feel like you start to notice that kind of feedback?
Well, I think if you ask the people here in this room, they're likely to say 3 or 4 months ago, they really started feeling the difference. And that corresponded with when we made arrests and had people in federal custody. And you'll see more of that going forward. Other questions? We're going to close this out. Maybe one more question. All right, seeing none, thank you very much for coming today.